So guys, today I wanted to talk a little bit about three tanks that I don't understand why Gaijin didn't add them yet. It's three tanks that were massively produced by their own countries, and it's just utterly insane that we don't have them, okay? They are all very much the main battle tanks of, like, being main, like, really main of these two nations, specifically. For a kind of a while, to be honest, and I don't understand why they didn't get added. It's just utterly insane. So let's get to it, starting with the Germans. So the Germans, guys, they produced the Leopard 1, right? And the Leopard 1 had many variants, right? Including two variants that I will add as one over here, but in the list, but because they are very similar to each other. But the cool one would be the later model, okay? Which is the Leopard 1A3 and the Leopard 1A4. These are basically mid-70s versions of the Leopard 1. And it had one major change that completely changed the vehicle, which is the Blumenvoss turret, which it was a new welded type turret that had internal spaced armor, okay? So it was very different than the original Leopards. And yeah, it looks, and honestly, I have to even check. Let me do a check just real quickly. Yeah, I just confirmed. Yes. Guys, it is pretty much the same turret as the Leopard 2K, okay? So basically, they had this idea of basically doing a completely different turret that has had spaced armor internally, just like the 2K, and it is pretty much the same turret, okay? And that design was implemented in the Leopard 1 there, right? Actually, the Leopard 2K was probably the closest thing that we can have to a Leopard 1A4 or 1A3, right? With some major differences, of course, but it would look similar-ish to that if you take into account that it would basically have the Leopard 1's chassis, right? But this would be basically a modernization of the Leopard 1 during the 70s. The objective was to completely redesign the turret, to modernize it, and yeah, basically have better armor. Although this new turret had about the same armor as before. It was just a little bit more effective with heats and everything, but it had a little bit more space for the crew, which is a good thing. The interesting one, the most interesting one, is the 1A4, which is the later model, right? Which had one of the most interesting stereoscopic rangefinder that you could have in the game, which is basically those coaxial vision kind of rangefinders that older Leopards had, but it was integrated to the fire control system. It means that although you would have a longer, period of trying to find the target than a laser rangefinder, it would also automatically update the lead for the gunner on the bullet drop, right? So it would be something very interesting to have. This tank also would have a little bit less ammo instead of 55. Instead of all the rounds that it could actually have in, for example, the Leopard 1, it could actually only carry 55, right? Out of the 60 rounds that the normal Leopards, the older Leopards would use, right? Of course, he had many, upgrades on the night vision systems, and many others. But it is very similar to other Leopards. So it would be very cool because, of course, it would be kind of a mix between a Leopard 1 and a Leopard 2K, kind of. Still with the 105, still the same ammunition, but a modernization of the older Leopards. And a bridge between the older Leopards, like the normal 1 or 1A1, or even the 1A2, to the 1A5, right? So it's... in between those, okay? So very cool, and yeah, around 250 of them were built of the 1A4, and then 110 of them of the 1A3. So a lot of them. So it doesn't make any sense that we don't have that. And which BR would it be? Well, it depends on the round, but it would be closer to like a 9.0, maybe 8.7, something like that, because of the lack of some systems and some things, but yeah, around there, 8.3, 8.7, or 9.0, between those BRs. Then, guys, we have the Russians. The Russians had two vehicles that I already talked about them in the channel a very long time ago, but it's still crazy that we still don't have them, which is the T-72, one of them, right? It's the T-72, normally called Ural, right? Ural. I don't know how you guys pronounce this word, but basically it's the early T-72 that doesn't have a designation, right? It's just called T-72, normally called the Object 172M, right? And this is basically the original T-72 from 1972-73, right? This would be very, very early model. And basically, it would have the lack of many of the upgrades of the T-72A. Being able to be a lower BR, right? So, for example, it doesn't have a laser rangefinder. It would have worse ammunition. And, of course, worse armor as well, right? But it's just crazy because, according to Tankograd and some other sources, there were around more than 4,000 of these built of the Ural and Ural 1 versions, right? So it is a very, very weird thing that we do not have these early models. Of course, like I said, guys, the main difference here would be ammunition, armor, that it's worse in a general perspective, right? On the turret especially, but even on the actual like upper glacis as well, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And the rangefinder, the fire control system, it's older, right? So the rangefinder is just using a normal optical coincidence rangefinder, right? So it's a early 70s T-72 that, I mean, would be on par with something maybe like a T-64A, maybe a little bit worse than that. So a 9.0 BR could be done or something like that, maybe with worse ammunition like a DM-15 only or something like that. But yeah, it's just such an iconic tank. It is produced in way too many numbers to not be in the game. So yeah, it could be the Ural 1 as well, which is the 1975 version. That would be a little bit better here and there, but overall it doesn't matter. Just the Ural 70s versions of the T-72 would be great. And then, guys, the last one would be on the same level, on the same way, the early model of the T-64. Yes, the T-64A is not the first T-64. This is a 1971-72 version of the T-64, right? And yeah, the original T-64, which is the Object 432, that initially the first prototypes were built in 1961, but the production, like with larger numbers and even like service kind of vehicles, were in 1965, more or less, right? Or even later some divisions, right? But basically it's a mid-60s T-64. The main difference here, guys, is basically two. The first one is that instead of using the 125mm, it uses a 115mm, similar with the T-62 gun, okay? And also, with that, it has a worse armor as well, okay? So overall, it would be a worse T-64 that would have a worse gun and also a worse armor, being able to be a lower BR. So the T-64A from 1971 is 9.3. It could be a 9.0 or even lower BR, depending on situation, because, if I'm not mistaken, the armor was significantly worse, right? Even the turret being with no composites, right? So it would be a very, very, older version of the vehicle, okay? It's even very hard to find information about this tank and photos, especially because a lot of them became the T-64R later in the late 70s, which is basically a rebuild, already built T-64 that was, modernized to be more on par with T-64As, right? But in a general sense, guys, it would be a tank that would be more akin to in between the T-62 and T-64A, okay? In service, in general, guys, it entered in service in 1966-67 officially, right? And it had around 600 of these built, okay? So the numbers are much lower than the T-64, T-72, sorry. And of course, guys, remember, in a lower, like, year-wise kind of production run, right? Because the T-72 Ural was actually used between, or built between 1971, 72, up to, like, 79, right? 78, 79. And the T-64, the original one, was primarily in service and built in large numbers from 1965, 66 to 1970, 71, right? So it's a lower number of years as well. And it was a very complex tank at the time to be building, especially the engine. The engine was very efficient and very fast, but it was a new engine that was completely different than anything else that they ever built, right? So we had some reliability problems, some production problems that was hard to build. So overall, that's why, right? But in a general sense, still 600 of them is a large number, and it's larger than the number of Leopard 1A3s and 1A4s that were ever built. So yeah, these 3 tanks, guys, they need to be added. It's insane that we don't have them. They are very iconic for the early days of these more modern MBTs, right? And of course, I mean, they're so iconic. If you had a World War III happening in, at that time, in the late 60s, for example, you would see these T-64s going to battle. If you had one in the 70s, you would see the Ural T-72. And other nations, guys, can even have the T-72, like the T-72M, because we have the M1, which is the T-72A for export, right? But there is a T-72M, which is just a normal Ural T-72 for export as well, right? So it is, problematic, I would say, because it's one of those things, right? It needs to be added, but it didn't get added yet. So let me know in the comments what you think about these tanks. They're very cool for me. Of course, they're minor upgrades and that, are minor differences between the versions that we have in the game. But that is just another reason why we should have it, right? So, yeah. I see you guys on the next one. Make sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and bye, guys. See you.